One of the basic building blocks of narrative writing is dialogue, the conversation between characters. To use dialogue effectively, you need to write engaging dialogue, punctuate that dialogue correctly, and paragraph dialogue to help your reader understand who's talking. Let's remember that we use punctuation and paragraphing to help your reader read fluently and with expression. For the reader to be able to hear the characters' voices in her head, the reader needs to know who's saying what and when their words begin and end. In a cartoon or graphic novel, the speech bubbles tell you who's talking. In written text, quotation marks do the job of speech bubbles. So, rule number 1 is put the exact words of the speaker in quotation marks. If we were writing an all-text version of this cartoon strip, we would put Jeremy's words, "I really need to stop bringing so many books home at once," in quotation marks. In the graphic version, we can see a little extension of the speech bubble pointing to Jeremy, so we know the words belong to him. Right now, our text version doesn't show us who's saying those words, but we can add a tag. We can say, "groaned Jeremy." That phrase, "groaned Jeremy," is called the dialogue tag or speaker tag. The second panel would look like this. His dad asked, "Why? Does your back hurt?" Notice that the tag, "his dad asked," is before the dad's words, but the tag for the next part, "Kinda," Jeremy replied, is after the words. Tags can go before or after the speech bubble. Notice that the third panel doesn't have a dialogue tag. This is because Jeremy was speaking at the end of the second panel and he's still speaking in the third panel. So it goes, "Kinda," Jeremy replied, plus the right side of my desk just calved off. Okay, rule number 2 is that punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. Think of it like this. In the graphic version, there is punctuation at the end of the sentence inside the speech bubble. The quotation marks are like the speech bubble. The sentence punctuation goes with the words on the inside of the quotation marks. This is true whether the punctuation is commas, periods, question marks, exclamation point, all kinds of punctuation, it all goes inside the quotation marks. Rule 3. There's a comma before or after the dialogue tag. When the dialogue tag comes before the quotation, this is an easy rule. Jeremy grumbled, comma, "I really need to stop bringing so many books home at once." If we're going to put the dialogue tag after, it can be a little bit trickier. Here's why. When the dialogue tag comes after, and the sentence that you're quoting ends with a period, you need to change the period to a comma. So here I've changed the period after once to a comma and then written Jerry grumbled. So that works when your sentence ends with a period and the dialogue tag comes afterwards. However, if the sentence ends with a question mark or an exclamation point, you don't change it to a comma before the dialogue tag that comes after. And the reason for this is you need the question mark or the exclamation point for the reader to put the proper inflection on the sentence. You need the voice to go up at the end like this. "Why? Does your back hurt?" his dad asked. If I took that question mark after hurt and put a comma there, I'd read it like this. "Why? Does your back hurt?" his dad asked. And that just doesn't make that much sense. So looking at the third panel, in the graphic novel version, there's a period there. And so if I were writing a dialogue tag after, I'd change that period to a comma. But if I put an exclamation point there instead, I would leave the exclamation point. So it would look like this. Kinda, plus the right side of my desk just calved off, Jeremy exclaimed. Or, kinda, plus the right side of my desk just calved off, Jeremy said. So that's a complicated rule, but when the tag comes beforehand, you always put a comma before the quotation. And when the tag comes after, you either put a comma, a question mark, or an exclamation point. The point is you change the period at the end of the sentence if the dialogue tag comes after the quote. All right, Rule 4 is about paragraphing, not punctuation. Rule 4 is new speaker, new paragraph. That means make a new paragraph each time the speaker switches. Note that this is a little different from our graphic novel. In the middle panel here, both Jeremy and his dad have a line of dialogue. But in the written version, the dad's words are all on one line, and there's a new paragraph for Jeremy's words. Even though they're on two different panels in the graphic novel, Jeremy's words are all on the same line in the written text. Let's look at a different text to see why this is a good idea. Here's a passage from the lovely book Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. One of the main characters, Peter, has gone to live with his grandfather in a new town. Peter has been watching some kids his age practice baseball. In this scene, practice is winding down and Peter's going to interact with one of the players. Peter picked up a couple of balls and handed them over. "Hey." The boy took the balls with a cautious smile. "Hey." "Nice play. That last liner? That ball had hair." The boy looked away and scuffed at the dirt, but Peter could see he was pleased. "Yeah, well, the first baseman made it look cleaner than it was." "Nah, you planted that ball. Your first baseman would be lucky to catch a cold by himself. No offense." The boy gave Peter a real grin. "Yeah, Coach's nephew. You play?" Peter nodded. "Center field." "You new here?" Okay, were you able to follow this conversation? Did you know who was talking? Note there's no dialogue tags. It never said, "Peter said," or "the boy said." So how did you know who was talking? It's because they traded lines back and forth. And every time there's a new speaker took over, there's a new paragraph. There's a new line for each speaker. Even when there are dialogue tags, you should do this. New speaker, new paragraph. Look through the books you're reading for your independent reading and look at the dialogue. Do you see them doing that? I'm sure you do. You'll be glad to hear there's no more rules, but there are a couple of hints we want to give you, and we're going to use this text from Nimona by Noelle Stevenson to do it. Nimona is this spunky little superhero wannabe, and she wants to apprentice herself or become an assistant to the evil dude Ballister Blackheart. So here's Nimona sort of applying for a job interview. Nimona says, "You're Ballister Blackheart, the biggest name in supervillainy. You're an inspiration." And Ballister Blackheart says, "Yes, well, I don't need a sidekick." Nimona replies, "Oh, come on, everyone has a sidekick these days." So hint number 1 is to not only include the speaker's words, but how they say them and what they're doing and what they're thinking, and maybe some description of what's going on at the time around them, mixed in with the dialogue. In a graphic novel, the pictures do all that, and you're just reading the words. But in a written text, you need to add some of the things that would be in the picture clues that you're using to understand the situation. So for example, Nimona exclaimed, "You're Ballister Blackheart, the biggest name in supervillainy. You're an inspiration." Nimona clasped Ballister's shoulder adoringly, looking eagerly for approval. "Yes, well, I don't need a sidekick," Ballister sneered as he pinched her off his shoulder like she was a smelly piece of seaweed. "Oh, come on," retorted Nimona. "Everyone has a sidekick these days." Okay, so the actions of how Ballister is holding her out with his arm extended, holding her by the nape of the neck of her robe, and some of the other clues you're going to have to write into the text. The second clue, the second hint is to use verbs other than said. The verbs here were exclaimed and sneered and retorted, and those tell you a little bit about how the words were said, not just that they were said. All right, Ravens, today we've been working on punctuating dialogue and paragraphing dialogue. You should put your dialogue rules and hints chart in your writing and craft section of your notebook, and then return to the Schoology page for some opportunities to practice and show what you know and use these skills to create amazing narratives. I look forward to reading them.